everybody. Welcome to another episode of PAR Real Talk, where we share stories from all over the world, great wonders that people are doing. My name is Pale. This is Power Ace Radio. I will be the host of the show. So if I get my guests to please introduce yourself, tell us your name, tell us where you're from, and what you do, please.
Well, good morning, Power Ace Radio listeners. This is Dr. Annise Mabry, and I am the founder of the Dr. Annise Mabry Foundation. Our foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we have two incredible programs under our foundation, the Southwest Georgia Community Policing Resource Center, as well as Tears Free Academy Homeschool Cooperative. And what I'm going to share with our Power Ace Radio listeners today is about the amazing work that Tears Free Academy Homeschool Cooperative is doing right here in the state of Georgia.
That is amazing. That's a perfect summary right there. And let's start with you, Dr. Mabry. So how did you come across, or how did you go about finding this foundation? What's motivated you to it?
That is an amazing question, Holly. The way that I ended up starting a nonprofit was I never intended on starting a nonprofit. And I know that sounds so insane that a person creates a whole unintentional nonprofit organization, but that's really what happened. In 2012, my daughter was the victim of bullying in middle school. We went through the administration, we went to the teachers. I did everything to help my child navigate through this bullying situation that we are taught to do. If you are in trouble in school, you find a teacher, you tell the teacher is supposed to help you. That didn't happen. If the bullying keeps going, then you go to the next level. You let the principal know, you let the counselor know. That didn't happen. Well, then you find the school resource officer and you ask them for help. That didn't happen. So I watched an entire system that was supposed to not only educate my child, but also protect my child, fail my child. And the tipping point came when the teacher that was supposed to be supervising the classroom decided that she didn't like what they were having for lunch that day. So she left an entire classroom of eighth graders unattended while she went to Taco Bell. So, you tell me, on what planet do you leave an entire classroom of students, especially eighth graders? And it wasn't even really just eighth graders. It was a mixed class of seventh and eighth graders. So you've got even more of age disparities in there. So they're left alone, unattended, and a fight breaks out. This young lady who had been taunting my daughter for years, since she was in the fifth grade, did something, and my daughter had just had enough, because up until this point, she had been hit in the back of the head with a literature book. She had been stabbed with pencils. They had spat on her food at the lunch table. She was so isolated that the only safe place that she had was to eat lunch in the bathroom. So I'm going to let all of your listeners let that sink in for a moment. Imagine you're an adult and you're sitting somewhere and someone comes and spits on your food, and the only place that you can find to eat your food in peace is the bathroom. There's something inherently wrong with that. So on this particular day, my daughter had had enough and she fought back. And when she fought back, all of the rage and all of the anger and all of the isolation and everything that was in her came out of her in her fist. And she ended up beating this young lady so severely that she knocked out permanent teeth. So, I'm the dean of graduate studies at the time, and I get the call at the university, and they're like, Dr. Mabry, we need you to come pick your daughter up. She's been in a fight. There's another student who is severely injured, and we're going to charge her with aggravated assault. And I was like, wait, what's happening? I was like, not the same child that's been bullying my child. And now you're going, I was like, I'm on my way. So I get to the school, and, the school resource officer has my daughter there, and they've detained her. and the principal is standing there. So everybody's got like this narrative of this story. And the other background about me, Polly, is I'm also a Georgia certified police officer. So I'm walking into this situation with full knowledge of what the school resource officer can and cannot do. And so the school resource officer starts to tell me, their version of the story. And I'm like, stop. What we're not going to do is you don't get to tell your story first. I'm going to hear from my child first, and then you can talk. I said, because we gave y'all every opportunity to control this narrative, and you gave up that right when you didn't protect my child. So I asked my child what happened. And my child is like, the teacher left the room. And I said, how long was the teacher gone? And this was a 60-minute class. And my daughter said, she only came back the last 5 minutes, but the fight was already in progress when the teacher was coming back. And I'm like, okay. And so then the teacher starts to, I said, I'm not talking to you. And so when I finally learned from my daughter how long the teacher had been gone, then I find out where the teacher went. I mean, my anger was just steady growing, growing, growing. And so I remember turning to the deputy and I said, are those the only pair of handcuffs that you have? And the deputy looked at me. I said, you're going to need more than one pair of handcuffs if you think that you're going to arrest my child on this day. I said, because if you arrest my child, I said, then everybody in here is going out in handcuffs. I said, the principal is going out for educational neglect. I said, the teacher is going out for failure to maintain a classroom. I said, and you are going out for failure to perform a standard of duty. I said, you have a duty and an obligation to protect. I said, all of you failed the assignment. I said, so if my child is going to jail, everybody's going to jail. I said, so go ahead and call for backup. And that became the moment that I switched from being just a mom to being an activist, to being an educational advocate. And I knew that the only way that I was going to save my child was I was going to have to do something different. So I brought my child home and started trying to homeschool her, which I didn't want to do because I had heard all of the horror stories about homeschool children. They were behind. They were socially isolated. I mean, everything that you can think of. Because I've been in education. I've been in education for over 20 years. Homeschooling was never something that I wanted to do, but to save my child, I was forced to do it. And so, because of all of the bullying that happened, my child ended up developing schizoaffective disorder, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and my child attempted suicide 13 times in 12 months. So, I sent a child to a public school system, and this child had no mental illnesses, no trauma. And what they send me back is a child that is so broken that I've got to build an entire educational system for my child that I didn't even intend on building. So I gave up my entire academic career and focused on homeschooling my daughter. Well, Polly, the other thing in this equation is I also had a son who was 6 years younger than my daughter. My son is autistic, and at the time he was nonverbal. He was diagnosed with selective mutism and then later written expression language disorder. So while I've got this storm brewing with my daughter, I've also got a tsunami building with my son. And the breaking point with my son in public school came when I went to pick him up one afternoon and I show up for the carpool line and my son doesn't come out. And so I hear them call his name 3 times over the little radio, and he still doesn't come out. So the principal says, why don't you just come down here and park, Dr. Mabry? They probably just didn't hear his name in the library. So I'm like, and again, law enforcement in me knows that something is wrong, because if you've called my child's name 3 times and there's not an adult escorting him out, something is wrong. So I see another child from my son's class walking out, and I get out the car and I'm like, hey, you know, was my child in your class today? And he looks at me, he says, yeah, but when we went to lunch, he didn't come back from lunch with us. Children will always tell you the truth.
mm,
And so I go in the school, and I go to the first place I go is to his classroom. And I approach his classroom teacher and I said, hey, um, you know, I'm in the car rider line. My son has not come out. And the first thing, without even looking at anything, the teacher says to me, well, I don't even think he was in school today. And I look at my son's chair and I said, but there's his backpack. And I said, so how did his backpack make it to school and he not make it to school? And, at this moment, I know that I can't be over the top irate, because if I'm over the top irate, they're going to shut me down and not help me. So I'm panicking. My mama's heart is breaking, and everything in me just wants to leap across the desk and choke this teacher, because, again, you had a duty and an obligation to educate and to protect. And again, you have failed your whole assignment. So I said, I'm going to deal with you later. I'm going to go find my child now. So I go on the kindergarten hall, because I know that one of the kindergarten teachers had been tutoring my child in language arts. And I was like, hey, have you seen my child? And the kindergarten teacher's like, no, not today. So I go to the first grade hall, and I find his former first grade teacher. And I'm like, did my child come to your class today? First grade teacher says, no, not today. And so the first grade teacher's like, what's wrong? And I said, well, I'm in the car rider line and they're calling for him and he's not coming. So she stops what she's doing and she immediately starts, going on a search with me for my child. And I remember just that feeling of, you know, what if, what if we never find my child? What if this morning when I took my child to school is the last time that I'm going to see my child? And like, I've got to get myself together. I've got to get my thoughts together. Long story short, we end up finding my son, and he had actually been in the library since 10 o'clock that morning. This is now going on 3 o'clock this afternoon, underneath beanbag chairs. And when I find him, I'm like, what happened? And he just kept saying, lunch was loud. Lunch was loud. And I said, okay. I said, you know what? I said, lunch doesn't ever have to be loud again. And so I pulled him from school and started homeschooling him. So, I've got a child that is on the autism spectrum and in the third, fourth grade. And then I've got a child that is suffering from severe mental illnesses in the seventh, eighth grade. And I am one mom. So, to try to help both children, I start to look at curriculum vendors, find this amazing curriculum vendor that I want. And they're like, well, we only sell to nonprofit organizations and schools. And I'm like, okay. So I call my attorney and I'm like, hey, I need to create a nonprofit organization. The attorney says, why? I said, because I need to be able to purchase curriculum for my children. And the attorney says, what do you want to call your foundation? I said, I don't care what you call it. I said, you can call it underwater basket weaving for all I care. I just need a nonprofit organization set up ASAP so that I can buy curriculum. And that is the backstory of how the Dr. Annise Mabry Foundation was formed. And so when we initially started, it was because I needed to buy curriculum. And what I did, once I realized why this particular vendor only wanted to sell curriculum to nonprofit and schools, is because they had a mandatory minimum license purchase of 25 licenses. So here I am. I'm one homeschool mom, and I've got 25 licenses. And I'm like, well, holy smokes, Batman, what do we do now? So I do what any normal person would do. I go on Facebook and I'm like, hey, I've got free curriculum. I purchased it for my son. If there's anybody else out here that wants access to it, I've already paid for it. Just let me know. And immediately people start offering to pay me back for the curriculum that I bought. And I'm like, oh, okay. But then I had some parents who were like, I really want to use this curriculum, but I don't have the money. So the people who could pay paid. The people who couldn't pay, I gave it away free. And that's how the Tears Free Homeschool Cooperative started in the curriculum business with supporting parents with homeschooling. Um, 2 years after I got my daughter into the homeschool program, we ended up getting her graduated. And from there, I realized, wow, I have this incredible high school program. What am I going to do with it? And it didn't take me long to figure out what I was going to do with it because the universe brought me my what next. And that what next came from my neighbor. Her daughter had actually been in school with my daughter. And like my daughter, her daughter had been bullied so severely too. But unlike my daughter, her daughter ended up dropping out of school in the 11th grade. And, my neighbor didn't know what to do. So they had tried to do the GED. That didn't work. They tried to go to a private school online. It got too expensive. So they were stuck. And, as I was sharing about my daughter and I heard the story about her daughter, I told her, I said, I think I know how to get your daughter a high school diploma. So we use the same program. We use Georgia homeschool law, which, Georgia homeschool law is probably one of the most homeschool friendly, homeschool flexible laws in all 50 states. And it allows a parent or a guardian to issue a homeschool high school diploma to your child or a child in your care at any age. So, Polly, what that means is a person can be 30 years old and a parent can still issue them their homeschool high school diploma. And I've had that happen. Um, and, once I was able to help my neighbor issue her daughter a homeschool high school diploma, the floodgates opened. I did not realize there were so many people in Georgia without high school diplomas.
Mhm.
And, so that's the story of how I got here, why I got here, and kind of what I'm doing now. So it's been a journey, to say the
Well,
least.
that is definitely a journey. I was just sitting there waiting, just listening intensively. Because you told it's a beautiful story. Like no, not what like things that happened, but the resolution and how you managed to navigate through that is really, really commendable. Um, I have my next question, but I'm going to put that to the side. As to so, how do you manage your mental health? With the kids, you already have your own problem, and then you're still able to get out and invite more people. How do you do it?
Well, the beautiful thing that I learned a long time ago, we became a trauma informed nonprofit organization, which means that everything that we do is trauma centered. But because everything that we do is trauma centered, means that we often end up with secondary trauma. And, to manage my own mental health, I have been in counseling for the past 2 years now. I've been in counseling on and off all my life, but for 2 consecutive years, I meet weekly with a counselor. And that is my outlet. There is no shame in having a counselor to work with you. There is zero shame in saying, I'm not okay. And some days I will say that, you know what, I'm not okay. I'm not taking any phone calls today. I'm not responding to any emails today. I'm not okay. The other thing that I did for my mental health is in June, I shut down my entire nonprofit organization for a month and I took my family to Europe. And we spent an entire month in Europe, in Italy, France, and Greece. And we connected as a family. We released as a family. We healed as a family. We built new relationships as a family. Um, and all of those things are important to my mental health. The other thing that I do for the people that I have working with the foundation is we have 48 days off a year. And I know that is unheard of for any company to do that. But again, we work with people in trauma, and I have to make sure that my frontline people are okay. And it's only five of us. Five of us serve 78 counties, and we have a little over 4,000 families enrolled in our homeschool cooperative. And all of those families have some level of trauma. So that means that all of those families, because they're in trauma, we are picking up secondary trauma. So we have to have those off days. And even last week when we did our faculty retreat, I didn't, I didn't book it in a conference room. I booked it at a salt spa. So we did guided meditations. We sat in the meditation room. We sat in the salt therapy room and we healed. We healed while we worked. So that's how I manage my stress. I'm very intentional.
That's really, really good. Because a lot of people don't end up realizing it. They don't. They just feel, oh yeah, something is happening. Yeah, it's happening because, as you put it, the secondary trauma somebody else is being. But you can't help somebody else until you put the fire out on yourself first. So that's really, really cool. Thank you so much for that answer.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely, Polly. I mean, that's the whole reason. Like, when you get on the airplane and the first thing they say is, in the event of a crash, make sure that the oxygen mask is on you first before you try to assist your neighbor. The reason they tell you that is because if you can't breathe, you can't help other people.
mm, yeah, it sounds such a very simple thing, but people don't usually think about it or take it. They just make always for the aircrafts, but it's generally in life. So no, thank you so much for that, Dr. Mabry. And let me kind of go into my next question. So you focus on supporting homeless, like LGBTQ, sex traffic survivors, and high school dropouts. We've heard about your inspiration into that, or how you navigated through that.
Absolutely. So, as my daughter was navigating the adolescent mental health care system, I started noticing that I was the only parent showing up for the parent support days. And, when you are the only mom in a room of 14, 15 kids that all have mental health issues, you kind of become everybody's mom. And as everybody's mom, everybody wants to share with you their stories. So when I started hearing these kids' stories, I was like, oh my gosh, and at the same time, I had gone to the director of this particular program and I said, hey, what are, I know that my daughter's in this program for her mental health. I'm like, but what are we doing about her academic well-being? Because at some point she's going to leave this program and she's going to have to, come back into the school system. And they were like, oh, well, our focus is not on her academics. We just give them worksheets and they work in workbooks, and the school can figure out, where they end when they go back. And that floored me. And so when, all these other kids are coming up and I'm asking them like, hey, because some of them are telling me that they've been there like 3 and 4 and 5 times. I'm like, well, so what happens when you go back to school? Does the teacher take the worksheets and y'all just figure out where you are in the curriculum? They were like, no. And one kid told me that they had taken English 1 3 times because nobody ever connected the dots. And I was like, no wonder these kids are dropping out. They're dropping out because nobody's connecting the dots. For foster kids, it was even worse. Foster kids, when they move from foster family to foster family, if that foster family that they're coming from and that they're going to are not located in the same county or even in the same school district, a lot of times it takes weeks for that child to get their transcript, to even know where to put them. So, this is another example of children taking classes that they didn't need, not getting the classes that they did need, and just being left behind altogether. So, and then when it comes to our homeless LGBTQ youth, I have a deep passion for our LGBTQ youth because I was an LGBTQ youth. When I came out, I was actually kicked out of my house. And the only person, I was 17 years old, couldn't even sign a lease to get an apartment. And the only person who gave me a place to sleep was my sister's ex husband, who was living in an apartment, and it was a 1 bedroom apartment, and he had a pull out sofa. So he slept in the bedroom, I slept on the pull out sofa. Polly, let that sink in for a moment. My sister's ex-husband, somebody that's not even connected to our family anymore, is the only person in my family that gave me a place to sleep. And because he gave me a place to sleep, I was able to continue my education. But when you're homeless, the last thing that you're thinking about is getting an education. So that's why those groups and the human trafficking survivors, homeless LGBTQ youth and youth in foster care, that's the pipeline for human traffickers, because those are the kids that nobody's thinking about. Those are the kids that nobody's fighting for. Those are the forgotten, the invisible. And, I want them to know that I see you. I see you.
That is truly, truly inspirational. Because it's not just that you've just picked the hour, I just want to do this because it makes money. Actually, you're doing it because you've lived it. So that's really, really commendable. And let's cover this bit as to where can people go and find you if they want to reach out. I know you have websites, social media, or tell us about that.
Absolutely. So, some of our greatest needs with the nonprofit, we operate a program called Resilient Scholars. And Resilient Scholars, students have to write a 1,200-word capstone essay in our program to actually graduate. And we have an essay review committee. We're always looking for new people to sit on that essay review committee and score these essays. The other thing that we do is we select one student speaker from each essay for each graduation. We do 8 graduation ceremonies a year, and we like to raise money to give out student speaker stipends, because I want to send these kids a message that your story has value. And when you share your story, you should get paid to share your story. You shouldn't have to unpack your trauma to people for free. You should be compensated for it. And so I always give between a $500 to a $100 student stipend, and we need help raising that money. We need help with people willing to share our work. How do you find us? We are on social. We are on Facebook at Dr. Annise Mabry Foundation. We are also on Facebook as Tiers, that's TIERS, Free Academy. And we are also on Facebook as the Rural Communities Diploma Program. And of course, I know that Paulie's going to drop all of these social media links into his show notes for you to follow. And other ways that you can help. We are actively looking for people to sit on our board. We're actively looking for people to serve on our advisory committees, our finance advisory committee, our fundraising advisory committee. So, there are many, many ways for you to get involved and for you to help change a life.
And that's, you've had it all, for you to help change your life. And for real, as you've had, Dr. Mabry go through her experiences, family, personal, to creating this great foundation. Let's go and support. And let me kind of go into another bit of question. No time is running out, but got to cover this. So what would you say is so far, the biggest challenge you've had to overcome in,
I
something that's
think,
stuck out that you're like, whoo.
yeah, Polly, I think my biggest challenge has been dealing with the mindset of a homeschool diploma. I've had to fight with the technical college system of Georgia because the technical college system of Georgia has a GED program, but only 20% of people who take the GED actually pass all 5 tests. So that means 80% of the people who are taking this GED are not passing. But yet I've got this program, and it's a homeschool program that allows people to get a high school diploma. And I'm still having to fight with technical colleges to accept this homeschool diploma because they don't understand homeschool law, and they feel that this homeschool program is in direct competition of their GED program. It's not. Everybody doesn't test well. So I'm not taking anything away from the people who want to go take the GED test and they do well at it. This is not the program for them. This is the program for the people who couldn't pass the GED. This is the program for people who got to the 12th grade and they stopped and they still want a diploma, because there are certain jobs that the employment application now says, are you a high school graduate? If you have a GED, you're not a high school graduate because you're not going to have a high school transcript. You're going to have a GED transcript. So if you click yes on that box, then that means that you falsified your application. If you click no, then you're going to be denied the job because they're going to say that you don't meet the minimum requirements. So the biggest challenge that I face is really navigating that space of, getting people to understand homeschool law, homeschool diplomas, and accepting homeschool graduates as equals to public and private schools. I know that sounds so crazy that that's my biggest challenge, but it is, because if I'm giving these people diplomas and I've got, a full technical college system not accepting a homeschool graduate, that's a problem because you're hindering their next step. I'm a firm believer of, if you can't help me, don't hinder me, because these graduates are going to go to the next step with or without you.
Wow, that's powerful. And hopefully that gets resolved with time, because as you said, not everybody tests the same, but people are brilliant in their certain ways. We just need to embrace it and just think of other ways of, structuring. Oh, yeah, you belong to the job or you don't belong to the job. Education is not just it. So thank you so much for that. And yes, so time is running out. Any closing remarks from you to the viewers?
Well, I want to just drop a few little nuggets for our Power Ace Radio listeners. One is, we've got a book coming out at the end of the year called Educational Disobedience. We actually have a website for Educational Disobedience, so you can sign up for the newsletter and be one of the first ones to get this book. This book is about my memoir. It's my academic memoir of everything that I endured on this journey and on building it. You only heard a few short minutes of it in this incredible radio interview today, but you'll be able to get the book and read everything. The other book that I'm releasing in August is actually a very short book called How I Turned My Homeschool Journey into a Six-Figure Nonprofit. It's 28 pages. And it doesn't tell you everything, but it gives you enough that if you're willing to follow some of the things that I did, you too, if you are starting a nonprofit, you can have access to some of the same resources that I used to create a six-figure nonprofit organization. And again, all of these are going to be dropped in the show notes that Polly is going to share with each and every one of you. Please continue to support Power Ace Radio, continue to support the Dr. Annise Mabry Foundation, and the life you change may be your own or it may be your child's.
Wow, that blew my mind. Thank you so much for that wrap up. It's been immensely a pleasure having you on the show. Tell you're so busy. As I said, how do you take time out, to even deal with it? But you came to share this great work of yours with our listeners. So we thank you so, so much.
Thank you,
And yeah,
Polly.
until we meet again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Until we meet again.
This is Power Ace Radio.